I warmly welcome Mr. V. Lakshmi Kumaranji, Managing Partner, Lakshmi Kumaran and Steran Attorneys. Thank you, sir. Stage is yours, sir.
Oh, thank you, Richard. Thank you, all of you, the members uh, who wanted to participate in this webinar. As Richard pointed out, this is one of the very important, I would say, exchange of ideas, brainstorming. We are, some people say, we are facing headwinds from the West. Actually, it is not headwinds, it is storm, a hurricane coming from US. Where is the slides? These are the difficult times which the industry is facing, especially those industries who are dependent on the export to US as a major destination. Suddenly, you find that these duties are going to create such a big problem. Then there is a cause for concern. In the history of India, especially between the US and India, nobody ever anticipated a situation of this nature where US would unilaterally will impose duties to the extent of 50% on all commodities coming from India. At one point of time, the rate which was coming from India was the lowest. We had the benefit of having discussions with your members at that time, where other countries were wanting to send their semi-finished goods to India, manufacture export from India because India is a favored destination, favored origin. Within a matter of 2 months, the situation has changed dramatically. Today, India faces the highest rate of customs as compared to the Asian countries nearby. And at this rate of 50%, the importers are not going to import. The buyers are cancelling the contracts. Understandably, nobody is going to buy at this rate of 50% when alternate sources are available. There is a complete disruption of the supply chain, complete disruption of our exports. And the government is working on different directions as to how to overcome these difficulties. That undercurrent, the negotiations are discreetly happening. Commerce Minister has said very clearly that the discussions are continuing and then we hope to finalize something by November. We really hope that we come out with flying colors then. What if it doesn't happen? What if the US continues to levy these duties? What are the options available for the Indian exporters? Should we simply give up and then walk out from the scheme? And later on, 2 years, 3 years down the line, if the tariffs are lifted for various reasons, do you think your customers will come back to you? Or they have got some alternatives and they may stay with them. You may have to again go and pitch at that point of time. They may offer a better price, etc., etc. So those are the uncertainties with which we are going to live. Today, I wanted to deliberate on the tariffs. How do we navigate under these difficult times? That's the whole purpose. In my talk today, I will be covering this US tariffs, the rates, exceptions, etc. One. When goods are subjected to various types, various duties, and various sections, I'm going to deal with them separately. If the goods are going under Section 232 tariffs, again 50%, what will be the valuation for that? Then I will also touch upon the ongoing legal battle which is happening in the US about the validity of the reciprocal tariff, whether the president has the power to impose these duties at all or not. I'll be dealing with that. After that, I will also be giving some pointers as to how to deal with these US tariffs. What are the alternatives available for the exporters from here? What all things they can do? And if they do so, what precaution they should take? I also want to touch upon that India has signed FTAs with a number of developed countries, and whether Indian manufacturers can explore those possibilities where the duty rates are zero for India products on a preferential basis, whether we can think of exporting to these countries to minimize the impact of this particular lack of exports to US. This is how I intend to cover today's topic today, so that all of you can think whether which is the best way for each one. I do not say that one solution fits all. Like you can't produce one shoe and say it fits all the feet. It has to be definitely different. And each one of them will have its own peculiarities. We should take that into account. And accordingly, we should tailor make solutions for each one of them. But my take in the entire thing is we cannot simply sit back and then say that, look, we give up US. What all things we can do to win US under these troubled times? That is the theme of my talk today. When you talk the US tariff, Mr. Trump has imposed tariffs under various sections in the United States. The first section he has invoked, or one of them which we can talk about, is Section 301 tariffs. These tariffs are imposed on a number of products coming from China. These rates were imposed during Trump 1.0, that's the first term. It continues today also. The rate can be 10%, 25%, etc. on a number of commodities. And the goods which are coming, we thought that with this rate, China could not export the goods to US. On the contrary, US found that the import from China has increased with the imposition of duty of 301. There are various ways in which China navigated this 301 tariff. One, where the customers are dependent on the Chinese goods, whether it is 0%, 10%, or 25%, it makes no difference because the goods are to be imported from China. There are no other source. There are situations where Chinese exporters and US importers, they sat down and then tried to, I would say, divide this particular tariff to each of them, absorb part of it here. Apart from this, China also went ahead in establishing factories in different Asian countries where 301 duty was not imposed. Cleverly, they went ahead, sent in semi-finished goods, entered into joint venture with the local partners, or setting up new factories, and started manufacturing and started selling from there. So therefore, the duty imposed under 301 by US in the Trump 1.0 was completely nullified by China by various ways of doing it. Therefore, Mr. Trump in 2.0 was not happy. How come? After imposing the 301 duties on those commodities, the very same commodities exports have gone up instead of coming down. And therefore, he wants to impose further duties on the goods coming from China. And we need to learn a lesson from this. It is not as though that the duties have been imposed and therefore we should sit in despair and do nothing. We need to now look at various options and possibilities as to how to navigate and overcome these difficulties. That we'll be discussing separately. Apart from 301 duties, Section 232 duties have been imposed on steel and aluminium, on auto parts, and copper. That is, these products, steel sheets, whether it is ingots, bars, rods, are basically steel products. If they're imported into US, they will attract this 50% duty. 25 originally, around 50 now. 50. But then somebody in his administration also told him, oh, if you are imposing this 50% duty on the steel, there are many commodities which use steel as main raw material, and steel content is significant in those products, which they call as derivatives. So if you impose duty on the steel, in the importing the steel, they import products out of steel and they can escape this 232 duty. And then he said, the people who have been giving the advice to him are very bright people. He said, I will also impose the 232 duty not only on the steel as such, steel products as such, but articles and products manufactured out of steel, where steel content is significant, those products also will impose as the 232 duty, which he has imposed. So therefore, as far as 232 is concerned, there is a levy for the steel and steel products. There is also a levy for derivative. Same thing the for aluminium. Now, having done with 232, there is separate tariff called EPA tariffs. These tariffs, one is fentanyl tariff, which is imposed against Canada and Mexico because these two countries are not preventing the import of fentanyl into US, and so also China. So there is a duty of fentanyl duty imposed under EPA. We are not concerned. India is not concerned about it. Fortunately, as of now, maybe our great exporters have not funneled the fentanyl into US. Therefore, India escaped this particular levy. But then, under the same EPA, Mr. Trump also imposed what is called reciprocal tariff. The reciprocal tariff was varying from country to country. It is basically a fixed formula, blind formula, adopted by his assistants, who found what was the trade deficit between US and the exporting country. For example, if India exported X worth of X billion dollars to US, and US exported Y billion dollars. If X minus Y is positive, that is, imports into US was more than export from US, the gap between that, by a formula, they found out of this at this rate he must impose custom duties called EPA duties. And that countries like Burma and all got, I'm going to show you the rate of duty was so high, and their export to US will be very minimal. But they blind formula, imports minus exports by formula arrived by imports, and then answer the rate you must apply. So that rate, as for India, is comes originally 26%. Now you have been good enough to reduce it to 25%. So therefore, the 25% duty on the reciprocal tariff. And then he imposed one more duty called Russian oil import, because India purchased Russian oil. Because of this, Russia was able to get money, billions of dollars from India, which is being used by them to fight the Ukraine war. I do not know any such argument can ever survive. Uh, Question is, he has imposed 25% duty on it. So therefore, India is facing a cumulative duty of 50%, 25% on reciprocal, 25% on Russian oil import. So there are 25 plus 20, 50% duty is being levied. Now, if you look at the challenges, India goods exports is about 90 billion. Tariff imposed on about $60 billion. Because remember that was import export from US.
Exempt.
And if you look at the tariff from other uh, Asian countries, India rate is going to be looking very high. In the meantime, bilateral trade agreements was going on, rather is going on, between US and the US. Now, if this particular discussion continue and the duties are reduced, well and good, all of us will celebrate. But if it does not happen, then what? People have forgotten long-standing relationships built over 30 years, 40 years. All those things are forgotten. It is money, money, money. Nothing to do with relationship. Probably this is how the Americans deal with that. But many of the American whom I know, they value relationship. But this is something very difficult. But as I said, it cannot be desperate situation where we sit down. These are the difficult times where we need to put our thoughts together, brains together, and how to overcome these difficult situations. This is going to be the main talk as far as today is concerned. Reciprocal tariff from specified countries from August 7th is like this. China is 30%. That will be till August 14th, but they have got 90 days pass. European Union 15%. Taiwan 20, Vietnam 20, Japan 15. For auto part, they were reduced also today. We will see that today's reports. India is 25 plus 25, 50. South Korea 15, Cambodia 19, Bangladesh 20, etc. A number of countries where the higher duty was not imposed, a minimum duty of 10% is imposed. One such country is UAE, Pakistan is 19% as against 50% from India. Sri Lanka 20 and Thailand 19 and Philippines 19, etc. Now, while duties have been imposed like this from India, there have been some exceptions to this particular rule. One is any semiconductor export from here, transistors, diodes, thyristors, stacks and trials, electronic integrated circuit IC chips, and parts of microassemblies, they are all exempt from the 50% duty. Export from India for all these items can continue at the original rate, MFN rate is zero, and therefore they can continue. Apart from this, President Memorandum of 11th April 25 further says he will exclude smartphones, flat panel display modules, modems, computer monitors, and other gadgets from the levy of these 50% duties. Therefore, along with semiconductors and transistors, the fully manufactured product like smartphones, flat plate display assemblies, modems, and computer monitors and other gadgets will continue to be levied zero duty in US. The 50% duty will not apply to these products. Now, I was mentioning about Section 232 duties. LCNA members may not be exporting steel and aluminum, but maybe they are exporting some other goods in which steel and aluminum may be predominant, and these items are called derivatives. If these derivatives are classified under particular HSM codes, then these derivatives also will attract 50% duty. Some of the examples are electric motors and generators, AC generators, there's the alternatives, and photovoltaic generators, wind power generating sets, stators and rotors, parts suitable for solely or principally the machines, electronic transformers, etc. And there are many more items. I'm just giving some examples. Some of your members may be exporting these items. And if they think that duty is only on steel and aluminum, my product is not a steel aluminum, it is a motor or a transformer, and therefore I am not required to pay any custom duty, that's wrong. These derivatives are also subjected to custom duty. Their rate is 50%. Up to this point, clear. Now, I dive deep in the section 232 tariffs. What exactly this meaning, when how it is being levied, on what value is imposed, etc. I studied. Then I found that this 232 levy on derivatives is to overcome non-payment of custom duties on the steel or aluminum content in it. The products are derivatives. Products contain steel and aluminum. If steel aluminum was imported into US, it would have been charged. You know, importing steel and aluminum, you are now importing articles of steel and aluminum, in which steel and aluminum predominate, in which case I shall levy, or US will say, US will levy that portion of the steel and aluminum contained in your product. This is called the steel content. So therefore, any product which is covered under the steel derivatives or aluminum derivatives, when export from India, will suffer duties which is equal to the duty that would have been levied on the content of the steel or aluminum, as the case may be, when export from here as articles. So therefore, there is a levy on the derivatives for these type of products equal to the duty on the steel content in the product. So now there is another clause which says that goods covered under 232 will not benefit rational duty. So there is no need for payment of any duty or rational duty with regard to the steel derivatives, so long as the steel contents are being suffered. Here, if people are interested in exporting the derivatives, which have been doing in the past, how we can reduce the total quantum of duty that we will impose on the derivatives, whether it be full 50% or the steel content or the non-steel content can be limited any other duties, whether Russian oil import exempt or not. These are important questions which all of us have to understand. If any of your members are exporting the derivatives as mentioned above by me, then separately they can discuss with us as to find out what exactly is the applicable rate of custom duty on those products, taking into account individually the steel content or aluminum content in it. In a talk like this, we should not be discussing confidential information. Therefore, let that be discussed separately off the line, not online. That's what about 232. While this was going on, some of the major importers in the US who suddenly found that they had to pay extra duties of reciprocal duties and fentanyl duties, they challenged the levy before the US courts, stating that the levy was illegal. The district court, which heard the matter originally, they held, yes, these levies are not legal. President did not have the power, etc. The government was not happy. They filed an appeal before the federal circuit court, and the appeal court heard the matter. 11 judges sat and heard the matter, and a majority of 7-4 delivered a judgment agreeing with the lower court, stating the President of the United States did not have or does not have the power to impose these duties in the manner in which he has done. Now, I'll spend about 2-3 minutes about this judgment. First of all, the court analyzed the US Constitution. Under the Constitution of the United States, which wing of the government has the power to impose duties? Is the US Congress. And the US Congress has delegated certain powers to the President. Using the delegation, can the President impose these type of duties forever? Measure is unlimited, time is unlimited. Is it what is called the delegation of powers? Was a question. Then the larger questions of separation of powers between the parliament and the legislature and the executive is also discussed in great detail. Now, after studying all those constitutional issues, the court by majority 7-4 delivered a judgment that both reciprocal duties and the trafficking duty of fentanyl are beyond the competence of the President of the United States. Now, those cases which went to this court at that point of time did not have anything to do with Russian oil imports, because Russian oil imported only against India, and that was done much later. So therefore, whether Russian oil duty imposition also legal or not has not been decided by this court. However, the court has held that the reciprocal duty imposed is clearly wrong. So this is the final decision as far as the appellate court is concerned. Now, what will the President, the Trump administration will do now at this point of time? One. In fact, the judgment itself says till 14th October, this judgment will not be implemented, giving the administration to file appeal or writ before the US Supreme. Till then, this judgment is in suspension. Importers cannot go and ask refund at this point of time till 14th October. On or before 14th October, if the appeal is filed, and if the US court grants stay, then the levy will continue. If after filing the appeal to Supreme Court, the Supreme Court does not give an interim stay, then the judgment will be implemented. However, if the Supreme Court overturns the judgment, obviously the levy by the president would become valid. So therefore, various scenarios are now before the courts. We can also speculate. After all, I studied a lot of work on the US Constitution and also the judgments like this, etc., as part of my professional career. The judgment is well written. Reasoning is good. Constitutional issues are very, very clearly explained in detail. Therefore, the chances of government winning before the Supreme Court under normal circumstances is less, according to me. However, the judges in the Supreme Court, majority are now Republican nominated. I am not say Republicans, Republican nominated. Whether they will tend to bend in favor of Mr. Trump is a question which let me thought about later. Such type of questions can never be even thought or talked about in India. Indian judiciary is very different from the way the selection process is very different from US. No executive, however high it may be, is involved in the selection of the judges. It is the choice of the collegium of the Supreme Court and the High Courts. The executive can only say, after seeing that, whether the selection process or selection of the judges are okay. If it is not, they can return them back to the collegium to ask them to reconsider. If the collegium says, yes, I'll reconsider, fine. If they say we reconsidered, but our earlier decision stands, then the executive has to issue the appointment order. This is how India has developed. There was an amendment made in Indian Constitution to allow, apart from the collegium, also the Prime Minister and others also to be involved in the selection process. That was challenged in the Supreme Court. Supreme Court has struck down that particular provision as unconstitutional. And now it is completely only with the judiciary and nobody else. The position of the US is just opposite. The nomination of the judges of the Supreme Court is done by the then government. And accordingly, judges are selected. It is not that because the Republican Party government has selected a person, he will vote in favor of Republicans. That's not the question. The perception in the legal field is maybe some of the judges may tend or bend towards this because of their nomination, etc. I don't want to speculate on this anymore. So all I would say is, judging from the merits of the matter, it appears that the petitioners or assessees have a very good case. But then, is that the end of the matter? After this, the US administration has no way they can impose these duties, etc. Maybe not. They can go to the Congress and ask whatever Mr. President had done by the executive orders could be done by the Congress. Congress has the full power. And the Trump administration has the majority in the Congress and the senators. So therefore, these duties can come in the form of legislation from the Congress, in which case we are stuck. This judgment will be no longer useful. And there are several other ways in which the judgment can be overcome. Because going by the tenor, the vigor, and the anger from which or by which these levies have been imposed, I don't think Mr. President will keep quiet if the Supreme Court holds that levies are illegal. Therefore, while the legal battle is continuing, we as business must find what are the ways in which we can overcome these difficult situations. That is going to be my next part of my discussions. Some of the thoughts which I have in mind is that our exporters of products, your members, can they think of restructuring their way of manufacture and exports? Can they think of contract manufacturing? Can they think of alternate sourcing? Can we think of exploring low tariff hubs? Can we also think of other FTAs leverages? So these are various possibilities by which we could, I won't say completely overcome, but reduce the impact of this 50% levy and go ahead and reduce the quantum of duty, discuss with the importer, share the duty burden, and go on with life. That's one other way of looking at it. While on this subject, I have come across the following situations. The US buyers who were hitherto filing their bills of entries, paying the custom duties, and clearing the cargo are now saying, oh, no. Goods coming from India or others under this time, etc., we don't know what is the duty. We don't know what is steel content, aluminum content, etc. We don't know whether 25% is reciprocal duty or this thing, because they don't want to take the trouble of finding out the different rates of duty under various section 232, section E-part duties, etc., etc. So they say, Mr. Exporter, you better establish your subsidiary or representative or an agent or a branch office. You file the bill of entry, you pay the custom duty, and deliver to duty paid. I'll buy. I will not take the trouble or risk of filing the bill of entry myself. Suppose tomorrow the valuation is wrong. Suppose tomorrow the rate of duty was found to be incorrect. Then the US Customs go after the importers who filed the bills of entries. They don't want to take any chance. They say, you come here, you import, you file the bill of entry, pay the custom duty, face the music, and then deliver to me. Later on, if there are demands, penalties to your account, I am completely insulated. This is the position taken by a number of buyers, US buyers, in the recent past. I am getting a whole lot of requests from the Indian exporters as to how to establish the importing entities in the US to continue to be in the business. That is separately going on. And I'm sure the same thing is going to happen to your members also. And they are also going to be put these extraordinary conditions that these duties ought to be paid by you by incorporating a company in the US or agent. They will take care of the problems. I shall be completely insulated. If that is the position, then what happens? We will have to think which are the countries where the duties are minimal. Where the minimal duty is 10%. There is no zero duty now. Minimal duty is 10%, which are the countries where we can think of starting manufacturing in these countries, if possible, and start exporting. I found Falkland and United Kingdom, there is no point. No point establishing in these high wages countries and exporting from there is not a viable option. Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, Cambodia are in the rate of 19%. As against this, if you find UAE, Nepal, Bhutan, and other countries which are not named in the Annex 1, they are at 10%. It may be worthwhile to see whether we can think of establishing our manufacturing facilities or contract manufacturing or supply semi-finished items from here to manufacture there and supply from there where the duty is only 10%. This has to be done carefully. You must select the proper partner there, understand the law in the particular country, and start manufacturing there. If your volumes are big, if it has to be done, this is one course available. But this has to be done very cautiously. If somebody thinks I can export a finished product almost finished on the semi-finished condition, send it to Dubai, finish the operation, export from there, stating that it is manufactured in the Dubai, you are cheating yourself and you are creating problem to yourself. As far as the US is concerned, they apply what is known as the rules of origin. Under what circumstances the goods will be considered being manufactured in UAE and not in India. If the raw materials are gone from here into UAE and then if they manufacture and supply, what are the criteria to say the item is produced in Dubai and not in India? There are various judgments of the US courts which adopt a principle called substantial transformation doctrine. The doctrine is in the country of immediate export, say Dubai, if the goods are to be considered as emanating from Dubai, then the operation done in Dubai must be substantial and the product must have gone through a transformation, which is substantial transformation. What is the substantial transformation is a decision to be done on a case-to-case basis, applying the various logics, rationale, doctrines proposed by the US Supreme Courts. Is a separate exercise has to be done. Therefore, one is choosing the current country where the manufacturing can take place, and whether if you decide to do so, in what way we can ensure that the transformation is substantial so that it can qualify to be called as emanating from Dubai and thereby attract only 10%, and thereby India can escape this 50% duties. It may not be possible for all. Many small and tiny manufacturers, they can't afford to have these type of operations. So it is a selective process, and some people who have lion's heart can do so. And these are also important to do so, because if you don't do that, if you forget this particular market, you may not be able to capture it later on. So therefore, we need to necessarily look at this. Similarly, what should be the value of the goods at the time of export? India adopts a system of CIF price. That is, if any goods are imported into India, and if it is to be charged a custom duty, it will be the transfer prices plus the cost of transportation plus the freight plus the insurance. All those things will be included, and on which you will pay the custom duty. That is India's position. As for the US is concerned, they don't charge on the CIF price, but they charge on the FOB price. And there is also a cost which is called the first buyer. That is, if X manufactures the goods in India, if X is selling it to Y in India and Y is exporting to US, then there is a clause in the US law which will say the transfer price between X and Y could become the basis for payment of custom duty and not necessarily Y price to US, provided X and Y is unrelated, etc., etc. And Y is the reasonable margin. So these are some of the items which we should look at. What should be the valuation as far as the US is concerned? Whether it is possible for us to take advantage of those clauses available in the US law, customs law, and accordingly we could. If this can reduce the duty from 40% to 30%, let us say, on the total, say, a price value, it's worth doing it. Therefore, we let work on this particular thing. So therefore, there is several ways in which we can interpret the US customs law and find out this should be the value on which the higher rate will be applied. Suppose, for example, tomorrow Russia duty is abolished for some reason, 25% gone. What remains 25%? The reciprocal duty. Assume 25 reciprocal duty stays through the US Congress or blah blah blah, whatever it is. Russian oil duty is excluded. Then you are now dealing 25% duty. On the 25% duty by the valuation process, etc., if you can reduce it to say 18% or say 15% or even 20%, then it's worthwhile for you to negotiate with your buyer. Buddy, now let us sit down. The 20%, shall we now share it 5, 15, 15 for you, 5 for me, etc., 10, 10, whatever it is. That discussion can start. But provided we know very clearly that the valuation adopted is correct. So that is a separate exercise to be done on a case-to-case basis. Again, I can discuss this offline on this particular point separately with individual customers. More than that, what is important is to decide the classification. In the past, when the duty rates are zero or minimal, nobody bothered what is the correct classification. You might have put 85, 44, 85, 17, blah, blah. They are not bothered, you are not bothered. Now, every item we are going to question. 232 covers several tariff items, sub-items. Your goods are coming there or not is to first of all examined in great detail. So therefore, first exercise to be done by all of you would be to determine the correct classification HS code for export to India. That's first thing you must do. Then we can talk about this. Then there is also called law of transshipments. When the goods are transshipped to another country, what will happen, etc. That duty is also separately. So all I'm saying at this point of time is that there is a way to sit down and analyze and reduce the burden. If the reduce the burden takes place, and if your buyer takes some hit because they all understand, then your export can still continue, but you must do it very carefully. Don't do it foolhardily. Do it with all the legal knowledge at your command. If you do it properly, you can still save your exports to US. Parallelly, I want all the members of your association to look at countries where India has signed the FTAs in the recent past and look at them whether India is going to get a beneficial preferential rate of custom duties to those countries as compared to others. We already have, before 2022, so many agreements already there, ASEAN agreement, Korea, Japan, etc., etc. Post 2022, India signed Australia, Mauritius, UAE, EFTA, United Kingdom. European Union is going on very well. It should be done by November, December, etc. Under negotiation, we got United States is under negotiation. Canada is under association. Israel is also under association. Poor chap don't have time for the negotiation here. They are fighting somewhere else. Gulf Cooperation CCN also is covered. So these things are ongoing negotiation, Oman, etc., separately going on. So therefore, you may have to think whether part of the consignments or production can go to these countries, enjoy the preferential rates. The one of the thing which I want you to think about it. While doing so, all of you must understand clearly how do you consider the goods are emanating from India or not from India. So each of the FTAs have their own formula for determining when do you say the goods emanating from that particular country. I want all of you to understand this very well. They're very, very complicated. I must tell you, I am, as advisor to the government of India, have participated in the negotiations of all these agreements. And I know when sitting in the negotiating table, discussions with them, how each and every item has to be fought, bargained, negotiated for getting. And therefore, the negotiations obviously ultimately result in results which are highly complicated. Therefore, I would strongly advise all of you to understand the rules of origin properly, classification properly. Because if you miss the classification and then put it wrongly, then different rules will apply, different rates will apply. You will be in deep trouble later. So you have to be extremely careful. It is unfortunate. About 6 months before, nobody was talking about the tariffs. Nobody anything knew about the tariff. Today, everybody talking only about the tariff. And unfortunately, there are population of lawyers or consultants or advisors who know about the classification issues, who knows about these FTAs, who knows about the rules of origin, etc. The population is very, very limited because nobody bothered in the past. So therefore, the knowledge level or the deep knowledge level available in India and abroad, forget about India, even abroad, is very, very limited. So therefore, you have not big choice in going to different type of experts. Not that I am saying that you must come to me. That's not the point. The point here is you have to necessarily consult expert so that you don't make mistakes because you can't afford to commit mistakes in these cases because it is different between heaven and hell. There is no difference. There is exactly. If you miss something, straight away to hell. So therefore, I advise you strongly to navigate it very carefully so that there are no mistakes ever done by you. The supply chain management, in this case, in your own case, your companies or the buyer's companies are going to be the one which will bear the big brunt. This burden on them is going to be huge as far as the management is concerned. Supply management, supply chain management. All of you must be careful. How do we get the inputs to the country? How to process? How to export the goods from the country? All these things must be known very well, and experts should come. There will be sanctions, that may farmer export controls. You have to take care of various laws apart from mere export import when you are exporting to various countries. Compliance, compliance, compliance. I would only say if you are to do anything, whether in India or abroad, tax authorities, first thing you should do is comply with the law, both customs as also regulatory. The regulatory issues will include non-tariff barriers. The custom duty can be reduced, but some other barrier can come in. And how do you overcome those barriers? How do you have a clean channel of export from India to this particular country? Has to also to be separately studied. These are the days where countries erect walls, not necessarily tariff wall like US. Non-tariff walls are also created by a number of things in a creative manner. Thereby, imports to those countries are being prohibited. How to overcome those walls? How to bombard them? How to ensure that those walls are meant for others, not for you? Then you have great success. I think that was. I think I've come to the end of my sessions. I would say, as for any